In 63 BC, an old king stood inside a fortress on the Black Sea and watched his world collapse. His armies had deserted him. His son had turned against him. Rome, the enemy he had fought for decades, was finally closing in. Capture would likely mean chains, public humiliation, and a place in a Roman triumph where defeated rulers were paraded before cheering crowds. Mithridates VI of Pontus had spent his life escaping that fate, and he had no intention of allowing it now. So, he reached for poison. This should have been the simplest part of his final plan. Mithridates had studied poisons for years, and supposedly carried a lethal dose for emergencies. Ancient accounts say he gave poison to members of his family before swallowing what remained. He waited for death, but death did not come. The king, who had spent years protecting himself from assassination, had apparently succeeded too well. The poison that could kill others no longer seemed strong enough to kill him. Mithridates ruled Pontus, a powerful kingdom along the southern Black Sea coast, from 120 to 63 BC. His territory lay mostly in what is now northern Turkey, but at the height of his power, his influence reached across Asia Minor and the Black Sea region. He became one of the Roman Republic's most persistent enemies and fought 3 major wars against it. His obsession with poison may have begun with the death of his father, Mithridates V, who was reportedly poisoned at a banquet. The young prince grew up in a court where meals could be as dangerous as battlefields. Palace politics were filled with rival heirs, suspicious relatives, and servants who could be bribed. A cup of wine offered an assassin a quiet weapon. There was no need to raise an army when a small dose could remove a king. Later stories claim that Mithridates also feared his mother, Laodice, who ruled as regent and may have preferred his younger brother. Many details about his youth come from traditions written long afterward, so they cannot all be treated as certain. Still, the danger was believable. Mithridates learned early that being born into royalty did not make a person safe. It merely gave more people a reason to kill him. Instead of relying only on guards and food tasters, he tried something unusual. According to tradition, Mithridates began taking tiny amounts of poisonous substances, slowly increasing the doses in the hope that his body would become resistant. This practice became known as mithridatism. He also surrounded himself with physicians and experts who understood plants, venoms, and antidotes. A scientific history of the tradition describes him as an early experimental toxicologist who gathered specialists to search for universal protection against poison. The most famous result was a mixture known as mithridatium. It was supposed to protect against many poisons, although there was never one fixed recipe. Later versions included dozens of ingredients, including herbs, spices, resins, and animal products. Doctors kept changing the formula, often adding whatever substances were considered powerful or rare. Long after Mithridates died, versions of his antidote remained in medical use. His fear became a medical tradition that survived for centuries. Could a person really make himself immune to poison? Only partly. The popular story makes it sound as though Mithridates became protected from every toxic substance. That is not realistic. Different poisons damage the body in different ways. Tolerance can develop to some chemicals after repeated exposure, but not to all, and repeated dosing can itself cause organ damage or death. Mithridates may have developed resistance to a specific substance. It is also possible that the poison used in his final attempt was weak, old, poorly measured, or slower acting than expected. Ancient historians were recording a dramatic royal death, not conducting a modern medical examination. We therefore cannot know exactly why the poison failed. Imagine hearing that the king you planned to murder could eat poisoned food and continue his dinner. Even if exaggerated, the story could discourage assassins. Mithridates ruled through force, charisma, and carefully shaped images of himself. Being known as the king whom poison could not touch made him seem almost supernatural. That reputation matched his ambition. Rome was expanding across the eastern Mediterranean, and many communities in Asia Minor resented Roman taxation, interference, and exploitation. Mithridates presented himself as a defender of the Greek East against Roman domination. In 88 BC, his forces moved against Roman territories and allies. Romans and Italians in the region were then killed in a coordinated massacre traditionally called the Asiatic Vespers. Ancient sources give enormous death tolls, though modern historians debate the exact number. The killings made lasting peace with Rome nearly impossible. Rome sent some of its greatest commanders against him. Sulla fought him in the First Mithridatic War. Lucullus drove deep into his territories during the Third. Finally, Pompey took command and defeated him. Yet Mithridates repeatedly escaped, rebuilt his forces, and returned. Appian's history preserves this long sequence of campaigns, from the First War to the king's final defeat. For Rome, Mithridates became the enemy who refused to disappear. Defeating his army did not always end the threat because he could retreat, find new allies, and raise more soldiers. His ability to survive disaster strengthened the legends surrounding him. Like the poisons that supposedly failed to kill him, Roman victories never seemed quite enough. After Pompey defeated him, Mithridates fled north to the Bosporan kingdom in Crimea. Even then, he refused to surrender. Though aging and losing resources, he reportedly planned an astonishing march through lands north of the Black Sea and into Italy. Cassius Dio wrote that Mithridates preferred to die with his kingdom rather than live in humiliation. He continued making enormous plans even as his body weakened. He apparently imagined gathering another army, moving through Europe, and attacking Rome from an unexpected direction. It was a bold idea, but to his exhausted followers it must have sounded like another journey toward disaster. His followers had reached their limit. Years of war, taxation, and failed campaigns had exhausted them. Suspicion also consumed the king. He punished people he believed were plotting against him and no longer trusted those nearby. His son Pharnaces finally led a rebellion. Soldiers who had once followed Mithridates against Rome now supported the prince. The old king sent men to stop his son. But they changed sides too. The ruler who had survived Rome's greatest generals was being defeated from inside his own family. Trapped inside Panicapaeum, Mithridates understood that his reign was over. He had survived Roman armies, military disasters, and countless conspiracies, but he could not survive the loss of his own soldiers. This was when he turned to poison. Appian and Cassius Dio preserve versions of his death, though they differ in detail. Cassius Dio says Mithridates poisoned his wives and remaining children, swallowed what was left, and then tried to use a sword. The poison failed, Dio explains, because the king had trained his body through large daily doses of antidotes. We cannot know whether that explanation is medically correct, but it shows how strongly poison resistance had become connected to Mithridates in ancient memory. He was no longer simply a defeated king. He was the man who had spent so long escaping poison that he could not use it when he finally wanted to die. When he could not finish the act himself, armed men ended his life. In Appian's account, Mithridates called a loyal Gallic officer named Bituitus and asked him to use his sword. Cassius Dio gives a harsher ending, saying men sent against him rushed in and killed him with swords and spears. Either way, poison alone did not kill the Poison King. Pharnaces had his father's body embalmed and sent to Pompey. The Roman commander did not mutilate or publicly disgrace it. According to Cassius Dio, Pompey ordered Mithridates buried among his ancestors. Now that his greatest eastern enemy was dead, he apparently saw no purpose in taking revenge against a corpse. The irony is almost too perfect, which is why the story survived. Mithridates feared poison because it had supposedly taken his father and represented the hidden danger of royal life. He spent years swallowing small doses, collecting antidotes, and turning his body into a defense system. Then, when he wanted poison to save him from capture, it failed. His name survived as well. The word mithridatism still describes the attempt to build resistance to poison through repeated exposure to small doses. His supposed universal antidote continued to influence medical thinking for centuries, even though later doctors repeatedly changed its ingredients. But the real poison in Mithridates' life may not have been hidden in a cup. It was the fear that slowly separated him from everyone around him. By the end, he trusted almost no one, punished people on suspicion, and drove even his own son into rebellion. He prepared himself against herbs, chemicals, and venoms, yet he never found an antidote for betrayal. Mithridates could fight Rome. He could survive defeat. He may even have trained his body to resist certain poisons. But when his soldiers abandoned him and his family turned against him, the king who seemed impossible to kill discovered that survival itself could become a trap. His story still feels almost impossible today. If you enjoyed this incredible true story, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more forgotten history.